Hello world of YouTube and welcome to a very self-indulgent and long episode, as you can see by the time length of the video you clicked on, of Tier Time, the show where I get niche with it, tier style. I don't know if I'm going to make this an annual thing, but I figured since I've already beaten all of these games this year, I'd follow up on I don't know if promise or just statement I made at the end of last year, beginning of this year, where I said I would do a video looking at all of the games that I beat in 2021, and I'm going to be adding some other games after I break down the games that I did in fact beat, but I played a lot more games in 2021 than I even had in the last couple years past, and it's because I was inspired by fellow Wednesday boy Tyler to keep a log of all the games that I beat, and I figured I'd do something with that in the form of this. If you like this, I may do it again for 2022. I've already started my game log for 2022, if not for anything, my own personal usage, my own personal chronicling of the games that I've beaten within my own proverbial collection. But unlike other episodes of Tier Time where I go in chronological order, in the order that I beat them, I'm going to go from F to S, like a standard like Discography Review DX, mostly because I want to make it easier for pacing's sake for you guys watching if you want to skip around and see the tiers at which I ranked them. All the stuff down here on the right-hand side, all the stuff here on the right-hand side are the higher tiers, and these games right here are going to be a part of these first three tiers, which I will do in one chunk before arranging all of the C and B tier before moving into the A and S tier. But without further ado, let's start with the F tier. The three games I'm putting in the F tier all belong there because they were easily the worst of the worst. While there are some redeeming qualities or some charm seen in the games I'm putting in the E tier, this F tier is truly like some of the worst games in my collection. And the first one that I did play was during the fighting game marathon that I did. It was the first game I played during that marathon. It's Shrek Fairy Tale Freakdown. This game is bad. As far as fighting games are considered, it's abhorrent. Its controls are super basic, the stage design is whack, and it's overall just one of the simplest excuses of a fighting game that I've ever played, and it was a short, breezy experience that I was glad to be done with by the time it was over. Similarly so, Mortal Kombat 3, also going in the F tier. I played this during the Portable Ports of Console Games marathon. Similarly to Shrek Fairy Tale Freakdown, it is easily one of the most exploitable games out there. The combo system is lame. The fatalities flat out don't work. Yeah, the music's good, but I don't want to sit through this game when I can just play the original. Mortal Kombat 3 already isn't one of my favorite entries in the series, and this Game Boy port does not do it justice at all. Easily goes in the F tier. And the last game I'm putting in the F tier, I actually played the morning after said Portable Ports of Console Games marathon. It is a game that I'll actually be talking about the console port of at some point in this list, but NFL Blitz. This game sucks. This port sucks, I should say. This port of the classic arcade football game is absolute trash. I hate so much of what went into this game. Like, at its core, sure, it's a competent football game, but the inclusion of these nightmare visual GIFs that happen anytime you get tackled, score a touchdown, anything happens to sort of emulate the animation from the game itself, it's nightmare fuel and creates this jarring experience that I would never wish for anybody to play in their own time. Truly one of the worst sports games I've ever played, and a terrible port of a classic football gem from its era. And in the E tier, we still don't have much else that we're going to be adding to it, but we are going to be adding a couple more portable games. First and foremost, Small Soldiers. I do apologize for the scrolling problem. I don't know why that's going on so intensely, but Small Soldiers, it was the first game I technically beat last year. I beat it during the first marathon of movie tie-in games, and it is a childhood game that I did not have fond memories of, and those fond memories were surely not there when playing it for you guys. It was a terrible experience that had potential, or at least had ambition. It was trying to be this rotoscope platformer in the vein of like Prince of Persia, the old Prince of Persia games, which ironically enough also have a Game Boy port. But due to the complicated stage design, the reverse difficulty, you know, it's at its easiest at the end of the game, and at the beginning of the game, it is this chore of a slog to get through. It creates an experience that no one wants to go through. It's a rough time by and large, and even inclusions like the nightmare-fueled JPEGs, bit-crunch JPEGs of stills from the movie cannot save this from being a truly bad experience. For all of its ambition, it falls very flat. The inverse of that, Natsume's port of Tony Hawk Pro Skater for the Game Boy Color feels like the laziest thing ever. It's just a series of mini games with some weird still animations when you do tricks to try and emulate Tony Hawk on the go, and it fails tenfold. I feel like it's smart that Activision got Vicarious Visions to make their games that they made in the future, while Natsume made a better portable port of a Tony Hawk game in its sequel. This first one is so simple, and again, it's a game that I had as a kid that I do not look all that fondly upon. It's not an unfun game to play, it's just very dull and such a brief experience that again took me like 20 minutes to show off everything that game had in store. Now, as far as a game that does have some charm, that does save it to some degree, Ready to Rumble Boxing. Not a great game, still not a great designed game. It's very simple, it's very rudimentary, it is the most basic form of this boxing game from the turn of the millennium. But I will say, some of its elements almost push it up to a D tier in a so bad it's good sort of way. Things like the bit-crunched 3D animations, the bit-crunched, "Oh, let's get ready to rumble" voiceover. It's hilarious. It is a bigger cartridge, so the fact that it's also got a rumble pack is a really nice touch, but I feel like all of those features ultimately do not save the game as much as to put it in the D tier, but it is very much a hilarious time that if you ever want to goof and gaff with some friends, I would actually encourage seeking it out and playing it. Again, it's worth a 20-minute playthrough. You know, I did it in like a small setting on the same stream I played NFL Blitz, and it wasn't like an awful experience, but it certainly wasn't my favorite that I had played throughout the year. Moving into the D tier, I'm going to put one of the first games I beat in my free time last year, the Angry Video Game Nerd Adventures. While not completely bad, and I gave it a 6 out of 10 when it came down to scoring it on the Twitter thread, which is linked in the description if you'd like to read my little review blurbs and the scores that I gave them out of 10, because I'm condensing a 10-point scale into a 7-point scale. The AVGN Adventures ultimately ends up in the D tier, if only because some of its game design shortcomings truly set it back from being a much more worthwhile experience. Sure, I like some of the level design, I think the soundtrack's competently enough, and I feel like the homages to old 8-bit style shooting platformer games doesn't completely fail, but some of the troll-like level design and the final boss can go fuck themselves. This game ultimately became one of the more arduous experiences I had faced come to the end of it, and it was honestly kind of a letdown. I do want to play its sequel just to see if they improved upon those design mechanics in any sort of facet, but I feel like this game is sort of the game a curmudgeon-y old man would make to give to the kids to show them what games were really like back in the day, only to fall too heavily on some of the pitfalls that those games have. It's not a bad experience. I still think it's far from one of the worst games I've ever played, but it was kind of disappointing for how average it sort of net itself. And actually, thinking about it, I think I gave it a 5, not a 6 out of 10, which is why I would end up in the D scale. It's on the lower end of 5. A game that I did give a 6 out of 10, but upon really looking at it, I was a lot more disappointed in it than I ended up seeming at the time. Warioware Get It Together. A game that I played on Cazsh Boys with Shake. Shake and I played the entire campaign of this game in one-ish sitting, and we were kind of underwhelmed by the end of it, and when looking at it from a design perspective, it feels like it's sort of stepping back from a lot of what made WarioWare fun to begin with. You know, WarioWare are a series of games that are kind of like party games. Like, yeah, some of the portable ones more lean into like a endurance-style puzzle game, and I enjoy those games well enough, but like the GameCube game and the Wii game and the Wii U game all felt like console party experiences in the vein of like an alternative to Mario Party. But Get It Together is not a good party game because it assumes you know so much about the design of the game going into it that it feels a little detractory. Also, the fact that upon beating the game, the unlockables you get are not that extensive and are actually kind of underwhelming. Even though you do unlock a lot more of the party types of games, they still don't hold up because they are designed under the preconceived notion that you played the whole game in order to get to that point. I don't know. It's a mess of a game that I wish were better because I like the Warioware series, and I would say out of all the games I played last year, Warioware Get It Together was easily one of the most disappointing. And I hate to say that because I feel like I liked some of the ideas going into it. I liked some of the mini games at hand, and I liked playing the game with Shake. I could never have a bad time playing a game with that guy. And if you want to see our playthrough of it, go watch it on his channel. It'll be linked in the description and on a time card right now. But I enjoyed playing the game with him, but I feel like in my free time, I would not have nearly as much fun playing through the game and unlocking what I need to unlock to play it in a party setting, ultimately never played in a party setting. A game that I admired the ambition behind, but ultimately thought it was a pretty confusing mess. Paratopic was a horror game that I streamed in full on the channel, and I really didn't like it all that much. Like, it wasn't bad, but it was so ambiguous and so bad at conveying what it wanted to really show you. It was trying so hard to just be an artsy experience that it kind of left too much ambiguity on the floor. You know, I didn't even realize, I did so much research after the game, after I beat the game to learn more about what I actually experienced, that I felt like left me wanting more explanation for how things are the way they are. Sure, there's some cool scares, and there's some good moments in the game, and it really tries to hammer in this paranoid, immersive experience, but I feel like because it's such a confusing mess, some of that paranoia and fear starts to dwindle away in vain of just confusion and frustration as you make your way through this brief experience of a title. And as far as the only bad thing I'll ever say about Resident Evil 4, Assignment Ada is a pretty underwhelming side campaign that sees you kind of just plugging through a couple of levels with the Ada model. It's nothing incredible. I'll be praising the game a lot more in further entries in this list, but Assignment Ada is easily the weakest component of what is otherwise a classic video game. I'm sure it's still an RE4 engine game, so it's designed competently, but I kind of wish there was more going on in this side story that I feel like does get fleshed out a little more, and one that I'll talk about a lot later. I played this one during the 24-hour marathon just to show off the rest of what Resident Evil 4 had to offer since I played it and completed it earlier in the year, and I felt nice to do it because I hadn't played Assignment Ada since I originally beat the game, but like I'm sure I felt as a kid, I kind of just wanted more out of Assignment Ada. Now, I'm going to go ahead and rearrange the stuff over here, spread out the things that belong in the C and B tier. And this won't be quite as in order as this was as far as chronologically speaking, but to jump back into the horror realms in the C tier, another ambiguously driven indie title that I played that I liked because it was less ambiguous was back in 1995. Another game that was an homage to the polygonal style of graphics that, again, had some weird abstract concepts it was wanting to toy with narratively, was at least a bit more straightforward in its presentation in a way that I could understand. You know, and I liked it. I thought it was a solid experience. You know, it was another sort of those one-and-done indie titles that I played like Paratopic, and it wasn't awful. It was still confusing as hell in pockets, and some of the level design was kind of obtuse and frustrating, but as far as an homage to games like Alone in the Dark or the early Resi games, I think that it was a really admirable attempt that I think was really fun to play through by the by, and I would honestly play it again in the future. Unlike Paratopic. Probably will never play Paratopic again. But I would play 1995 again, and I think that's the big distinction between these two, because I think I gave them the same score on Twitter, but I like this a little more. Another game that I played actually on Shake's channel in Cazsh Boys, we kind of just experienced everything the game had to offer, was Parappa the Rapper 2. Same story as Parappa the Rapper 1 as far as what it is, but I kind of like the songs less of Parappa the Rapper 2. It's still got some bops, it's still got some fun concepts, and some wacky ass surreal ideas and visuals, but it's also got some odd conveyance problems, and some of the new additions that they made to the design aspects aren't really completely clear. And like Parappa the Rapper 1, I don't think it's the best rhythm game. It's kind of flawed in how you're supposed to actually play it. It feels like it's a little off. But it's still a solid rhythm game by the by. I had fun playing it with Shake, because again, I could never have a bad time playing it with that guy. Anything with that guy. But Parappa the Rapper 2, given that that was actually my first exposure to it, was through the playthrough with Shake, I definitely was a little disappointed in some of the songs. Was not quite as good. Kind of disappointing. Now, if you notice, I rearranged my order here a little bit because I realized it was a little funky, judging by what I rated it and how I feel about it. But one game that I was going into wanting to like more than I ended up liking was the first game that I did a full playthrough of. I played through Lord of the Rings Return of the King, broken up into 2 streams in one day, but I played the entire game in a day's sitting, and I didn't hate my experience. I feel like some of the level design was a little dated. The graphics were very much a piece of their time, and while I liked the sort of integration from film clips into the gameplay, it was a charming thing. Some of them graphics just aren't very good anymore. I like the extensive unlockables that you can have in this game, and I feel like by and large a lot of the levels are solid. I feel like it's a decent beat-em-up game. I feel like time just hasn't been very kind to it. It's not my least favorite movie license game, clearly, judging by some of the lower entries on this list. But I definitely think that it isn't as good as I used to think it was. It also doesn't help that they have made some really good Lord of the Rings universe games over the last 10 years that I thoroughly enjoy. But Return of the King was still delightful in pockets. It was just a bit arduous at times that kind of set it back in ways that were pretty negative to me. Now, a game I know is just very, very solid, but does that solid style very well. Crash Bandicoot The Huge Adventure, the first Game Boy Advance game that I did actually a finished Friday's run of on the channel. I had a lot of fun replaying that game. It's not my quintessential Crash Bandicoot experience, and it's not the only Crash Bandicoot game I ever played growing up, but it was one that I did play a lot growing up, and I had a lot of fun revisiting it in pockets. Again, some of the level design is a bit arduous looking back. I'm looking at you, Snowjob. But I do like a lot of what this game does at translating Crash Bandicoot into a portable sense. Sure, the soundtrack is a little milquetoast at times, but still, it's not that bad of an experience. It's very, very solid, and I feel like is a decent enough of a time for somebody who likes Crash Bandicoot and hasn't given this game a chance. Give it a spin. Give it a whirl. You know, see if it sits with you. You know, it's not perfect. It's a little flawed, but it's certainly all right. The last game I'm putting in the C tier is a game that I actually made a video on as far as my problems with it and where I would fix those faults. It's the most recent, as of right now, generational Pokemon game, Pokemon Sword / Pokemon Shield. I streamed this game in its entirety. It was in my stream rotation last year, and while I like pockets of it, and I love that my favorite Pokemon is a common Pokemon, this game wasn't it, Chief. It was very frustrating to play through the last crawl of this game. For a game that had such promise in the new things that it presented to the Pokemon formula and the new ideas it wanted to introduce as far as things like the wild area and the gym challenges, it fumbles the bag so egregiously by the end of it because of the lack of continuation of interesting gym challenges and the overall crawl that is the Elite Four portion of this game. I didn't hate my experience with Shield, and like every Pokemon game, I really loved my team by the end of it, but I really wanted to like this game more than I did. And I think that that's the opinion that I think Tyler and Evan also at least shared at the time, but I certainly haven't come back to this game since I've beaten it, and I don't know when I will to play the DLC, because I felt very fulfilled. I was very done with the game by the end of it. I think it also helps that I played a handful of other Pokemon games in its wake, but I didn't hate Shield. I just wanted to like it a lot more than I did, so it's ending up in the C tier. And I want to take some time to say thank you for watching. Thank you for joining me. Be sure to always, if you're watching this video in one sitting, be sure to have a drink on hand and maybe have a snack or two. I've still got a long way to go, and I've got a lot of games I want to talk about. So I've got myself a drink. I've just had myself a snack. I hope that you've got something by your side as you join me on this adventure. If you're liking it so far, be sure to give it a like, and I'm just going to go ahead and keep on going into the B tier. So the last game I'm going to put in the C tier is sort of a last-minute addendum. Is a game that could end up in the B tier, but when comparing it to what else is in the B tier, it doesn't quite measure up to the same caliber. It's still a very solid game, and I gave it a 7, but I'd say it is a low 7 at the very least. That is Godzilla Destroy All Monsters Melee. I like this game. I think that it's easily one of the first really, really good Godzilla games. And I love how it sort of has this wrestling style of fighting that's very grapple-centric, mixed with a sort of party flair with power-ups in these big open arenas for you to stomp around and destroy. And it embodies a lot of what makes Godzilla fun as a film series. I just put it in the C tier because it doesn't not quite to this caliber. Not quite a B tier game. It's a 7. It's a low 7. And it's a very solid outing, but I would say I don't get quite the same enjoyment out of it as I did the games that I'm putting in the B tier for their own respective reasons. Case in point, one of my favorite portable ports of a console game, Street Fighter Alpha 3 Upper. This was actually how I experienced Street Fighter Alpha 3 as a kid. And while the Alpha series isn't my favorite offshoot of the Street Fighter name, I do enjoy the engine, and I think that Crawfish Interactive translated the game incredibly well on the Game Boy Advance. I think it's a really robust package that is impressive to look at. The animations are all smooth. A lot of the fact that the roster's all here with super moves is impressive as hell. Really, the one thing that it's missing from a cosmetic perspective is the voiceover for the announcer. And even then, the fact that that's really the only big thing missing is kind of insane. But Crawfish did it. They made a great port of this game on a portable console, and I respect them for it. Now, the next game I'm going to talk about, Call of Juarez Gunslinger, is kind of the first in a handful of solid first-person shooters that I played in 2021. I played it in my free time. I bought it because it was dirt cheap on the Switch, and it's the offshoot last game in a series that was introduced in the 2000s or the 2010s. It's a Western series where you play as a cowboy in the Western doing cowboy things. Unlike a game like, say, Gears of War Judgment, I feel like Call of Juarez does not fumble the bag whatsoever, and I liked it so much, I actually bought a couple of the other entries in the franchise to see what the franchise was like during its glory days, because this is a charming, endearing shooter that I enjoy, not only because it's decently enough as a shooter, but the narrative twists that it throws in because of the unreliable narrator, the showdown sequences are really, really fun, and I like that it's also trying to do pseudo historical education because you encounter so many famous outlaws from the Wild West, and I like how all of that compounds into a decent enough time. I feel like if there's a sleeper hit game that I played in all of last year as far as the older games that I played, Call of Juarez Gunslinger, give it a shot. It's really not that bad, and it's honestly really surprising. A game that is kind of underrated in its own regard as well, Mortal Kombat Deception. I played it during the fighting game marathon. I played the Conquest story mode, but that alone sort of embodies what I think is endearing about Mortal Kombat Deception. While it was dropped during an era of this series that a lot of people, myself included, would call a low point, I feel like Deception transcends above Deadly Alliance and Armageddon because of all the bells and whistles in place. It has a great Conquest mode that sees you going all across the realms of Mortal Kombat. It's got your typical tower climb, but it's also got a kart racing game and a puzzle fighter-esque falling block puzzle game. There's a lot of shit in Mortal Kombat Deception that make it a full-fledged package, and I think it is a really good entry in the series, especially at the point that it came out at. I think that the roster's a lot better than Deadly Alliance. I don't think it's as bloated as Armageddon was. and lends to easily one of the most underrated entries in this series, IMO. I think that it's definitely a game that holds up incredibly well, and I feel like was a worthwhile sequel to what was admittedly a decent foundation that Midway just didn't know what to do with at the time. A game that I played in my stream rotation that was a request by my buddy Evan, Owlboy is coming next in the B tier ranking. I enjoyed Owlboy a lot. I thought that it was a great solid ass indie platformer. You know, Evan hyped up this game a lot before I played it. You know, he loved the soundtrack, which the soundtrack was very lush and grand and well orchestrated. The game design gimmick that the design gimmick that the game was aiming for, with the flying around with a companion that acts as your sort of attack source, was really well utilized and led to some interesting sequences. I think that some of the temple design of the game was also really good at laying into the strengths that the gimmick had to present. My biggest issue with the game, and the biggest crux in the game, IMO, is its third act. I think it stumbles a bit to the finish line. It picks itself back up with its actual ending, but the lead up to that in the final act was kind of inconsistent, kind of underwhelming with the adventure that I had had so far. But outside of that, it was a really fun game, and I thought was a solid-ass platformer that I was glad to have played through last year. Game that I played in the first marathon of the year that was also kind of a request by my buddy John was Peter Jackson's King Kong, the official movie of the game. I played the GameCube port because it's the one that I found in the wild. But it's a first-person shooter slash 3D brawler. It's an interesting experience that's similar to Call of Juarez, is just a solid game that has a lot of good design aspects at its core. You know, this game really wants to focus on immersion in the first-person sequences with no HUD, and I think that the game executes that very, very successfully, while juxtaposing those immersive first-person sequences where you're fighting these monsters on the island with some great 3D King Kong brawler sections that I also think are pretty fun. You know, this game had some great moments in it. It had a great, you know, utilization of its set piece as a whole. I feel like it was a compelling game to play through, and I feel like, again, in the pantheon of movie games, this is kind of an underrated gem in my eyes, you know? I don't see many people gassing up Peter Jackson's King Kong, the official movie of the game, but it was a great treat that I was glad I could experience very early on in the year, and I had a lot of fun with. And again, sort of similar to Call of Juarez, just sort of reined in a series of solid-ass shooters that I played in 2021. Continuing on the Switch train, as you can see by a lot of the Switch games that I've already played and will be playing up ahead, Mario Kart 8 Deluxe was a game that I played in full with Rachel in our free time, and we did a Rachel's Game Corner with it as well. She bought me the game as a gift, and I think that this is a great entry in the Mario Kart series. Is it my favorite? No. Does it have design aspects that I think are kind of frustrating? Absolutely. But I think that the game itself as a whole is still a well-rounded package. And while I'd played it before getting a Switch myself, having my own copy of it and allowing myself to dive further into a lot of what the game has going on, I found myself enjoying a lot of the track choices, a lot of the track designs from the newer games. I really loved the third-party Nintendo introductions in here. You know, I love seeing F-Zero representation. You guys know that probably. You guys already know I love Zelda, and I like the Hyrule track. I like Link here. I think the Animal Crossing track is charming. I love that Nintendo is paying credit to Excitebike in 2020. What did this come out? 2017? I thought it was a great track. You know, I like a lot of what this game has going on. I like that they revamped the battle mode in this game. While I think it's interesting that they're giving DLC to this game 5 years after the fact, I think that the game itself, the core game that's here, is very solid and stands as, I would say, one of the more replayable entries in this series. I also had a hell of a time with Mario Party Superstars when it came out. While I think they could have done more with adding more maps, I think that a lot of the map selection here is really choice. I like that they brought back sort of a single-player aspect with the minigame mountain or whatever it's called in this. And I think that the minigame choice on here was also incredibly well-rounded. It's a lot of fun. It's a good party game. I've had fun playing it with Rachel, both on the channel and in our free time. It's one of those games that we definitely played a lot when it came out and had a lot of fun with. We also just kind of wish there was a little more to this package. You know, I could see them doing DLC, hell, 5 years down the line maybe, when they don't want to make a new Mario Party. But I think that this, as far as a base package, is pretty good. I think it's pretty stinking good. You know, it was just shy of my Games of the Year list for last year because of some of those faults that I have with it, but I feel like if you like Mario Party and you want to wax some nostalgia, Mario Party Superstars is a really good entry in the series, and I would honestly think that the cashing in on nostalgia benefited this series a hell of a lot. Speaking of solid remakes that came out last year, Pokemon Brilliant Diamond, also a game that was just shy of my top 11 of the year, but I thought that Brilliant Diamond was a robust remake that integrated some of the faults I've had with modern Pokemon games pretty well, with having a decent level cap and a decent, you know, challenge that continued to propel me throughout the experience. You know, I thought that the underground sequence was even better in this. I like Gen 4 well enough, and I think that this is a decent remake of that series. You know, I think that it was a fun time. Like most good Pokemon games, I had fun with Pokemon Brilliant Diamond. Is it my favorite remake? No, but I think it is. But I think it is a really well done one that still goes toe-to-toe with some of the remakes that they've done thus far in the series. Game that I played with Rachel on the channel, as you guys saw, Little Nightmares, a very solid sort of cinematic platformer in the vein of a game like Limbo, something else I'll talk about later on in this video, as you guys already know. But I had fun with this. Rachel kind of got obsessed with this game last year. She was watching a lot of playthroughs of it, and she wanted to play it together, and I had a lot of fun playing it with her. I love the character design. I love the creature design. I like the twist that the game throws at you, and I think that it's a charming little spooky romp. You know, it's got a good, distinct visual style, and it carries itself into the horizon. I thought it was a really fun time, and I like playing it with her, because it was sort of an inverse of the show, where she knew more about the game than I did going into it, and it was a fun time. With a proper sequel on the horizon, I figured I'd finally sink my teeth into Mario Rabbids Kingdom Battle, the Donkey Kong DLC, because I loved Mario Rabbids Kingdom Battle. It was one of my favorite games I played in 2020 easily, even if it wasn't a new game, and I think that this DLC was really admirable. It added more of what I loved. I thought that the choice of using Rabbid Peach out of all the main game characters into this side adventure fit perfectly. I thought making a Rabbid Cranky Kong was great, and I like Donkey Kong here. I feel like he's kind of broken when it comes to movement, but it makes a lot of sense. You know, I do wish there was more in this DLC as far as bringing other Kongs into the mix, but I thought this was a solid-ass adventure, and I will admit, I loved hearing Grant Kirkhope's score for Donkey Kong 64 and some of his interpolations of other Donkey Kong themes so much in this game, and I thought that it was beautiful. It's what good DLC should be. It provides more of what I loved with other new things to zest up the mix. I also did a second playthrough of NFL Blitz for my Breaking the Curse run, where I try to beat the game with the Chicago Bears, the worst game, or the worst team in the game, and honestly, both times that I played it have brought me even more of an appreciation for this series, and kind of for the sport of football. I don't watch football, I'm not a sports guy, but I've had fun playing NFL Blitz the times that I played it. You know, when I was a kid and I played the game, it was more just, can I get the ball down there in the most consistent way possible? But when playing it very seriously, like I was to try and win the Super Bowl, I grew to love the coaching aspect and the strategy behind picking plays. You know, I broke down the nuance and the complexities of that aspect of football in a way that I got a lot more appreciation of this last time that I played it. You know, I liked it. I like this game a lot. I already think it's one of the better sports games that I've ever played, but playing it with this lens, I thought was even better. And I think that it's still one of the best arcade games and one of the best sports games of all time. When I was in Philly with the Burger Kings, we played a round of Monster Prom XXL at Shake's request, and if you want to watch that, it's linked on screen now in a card up top. But I had fun with this. It's a charming dating sim party game where you're answering a lot of questions, you're strategically picking things to do with your character, competing against the other characters, and trying to get your way to get your romance to prom. It's a cute game. It's a lot of fun. Again, similarly to Little Nightmares with the spooky stuff, it doubles down on the spooky adjacent vibe with an aesthetic that I think it carries into the Horizon so very well. This game is charming as hell, and that was, again, a lot of fun to play with those guys. We had a lot of fun reading the dialogue and getting into the bit of the game, and it was good. It was a really good time. It was charming. I'd like to play it more. You know, I'm putting this ranking here based off of the one full experience I had with those guys, but I liked this. I thought it was great. I thought it was a lot of fun, and it's a great party game. It's a great party game where you're sort of playing, again, this sort of weird competitive dating sim where things happen on each other day that feels different, and it's a good time. It's a good time. During my 24-hour marathon, I played Fez, a game that some don't like for their own well-deserved reasons. I understand the hatred for Phil Fish. I think he's a piece of shit person. But I played this game because it's got my album of the decade as its soundtrack. I really love Fez. I really love Fez's soundtrack. I think that it's a musical masterpiece. I thought Disasterpiece made a masterpiece with the Fez soundtrack. The game itself is fun. It's a solid, quirky indie platformer that is all about perspective, and I feel like it runs that theme pretty solidly throughout. I feel like some of the puzzles get a bit obtuse the more the game goes on, but having my second broadcast playthrough of the game, because I did record it blind my first ever playthrough, and I loved it then, and I still have a lot of love for the game now, you know, in spite of its sole creative forces issues as a person. He's a real piece of work. I think he made a solid game. I think he made a really solid game that is carried full force sheerly by its soundtrack. Its soundtrack is incredible. I've ranted about the soundtrack enough. And again, I've kind of talked about Fez in pockets because of that. But it's a fine enough game. I think it's charming. I think its level design is nice. I think its quirks on the gimmick it's trying to hammer in carry itself pretty well throughout the entire game. Another game that was just shy of my Game of the Year list, Nickelodeon All-Star Brawl. I like this game. I thought it was really solid, if not a bit soulless. They've added stuff in some of the DLC post my initial reactions to it, and I do appreciate some of that in the form of the DLC characters they've added, like Shredder and Garfield, and the fact that they've added costumes in the game is really nice. But I feel like this game as a whole is a pretty well-designed fighting game. You know, it's not quite Smash, even if it's trying to be Smash adjacent, but it's different enough to make it a different experience that I think is also very, very fun. Now let's get into the experiences that I loved by looking at the A tier. Now, as you guys saw, none of my top 11 games of the year ended up in the B tier. So my games of the year for 2021 are all going to be in the S and the A tier, because I do love the games well enough to put them in there. Even if I thought that they had faults here and there, they were still great enough experiences to end up high enough to be in the A tier. Starting off, game I played on the 24-hour marathon and tried to play earlier on before that, Metroid Fusion. Now, if I was going to do a tier list of Metroid games, this might not be in the A tier, but when looking at the pantheon of all the games I played, this is definitely a cut above all of these games. You know, it at the time was kind of seen as like a black sheep in the Metroid series, you know, because of its more narrative-driven, hand-holdy sort of approach it did to the Metroidvania formula. But I think to its credit, it does it very, very well. You know, as far as creating an atmosphere and cementing you into it, Metroid Fusion does that full stop. It is a well-designed, great experience. You know, SAX is terrifying. The diversions that it throws you through because of SAX and the wrenches that SAX throws into your progression are always an enjoyable experience. I love the look of this game. I love Samus's design. The combat is just as tight as ever, and it kind of helped kick off a renaissance for the series in the 2000s that I'm hoping Metroid Dread does for Metroid in the 2020s. Similarly, Soul Calibur 2, one of my personal favorite fighting games. I rated it higher in my Twitter review, but I shouldn't have done that because I don't think it's a 10 out of 10 game. I think it is a great game. It's easily an 8 out of 10 game because I feel like while it is a tight well-constructed fighting game at its core. I do feel like some of its features, when looking at other fighting games, it feels a little bit obtuse, but I do like the approach that this game takes for 3D combat. I think that the roster's really good. I love the Weapon Master mode. That's what I played during the fighting game marathon. That's when I played Soul Calibur 2, and I had a blast with it. I had a lot of fun playing through Weapon Master mode, getting to show off some of my favorites like Keelik and Talim, while also showing off Spawn a lot because he was the exclusive in the version that I played on the stream, and the Xbox version was the version that I have always had. But I hold a lot of memories of Soul Calibur 2 because I do think that it is a well-rounded, well-constructed fighting game at its core. I love the variety of weapons that you can unlock, and I love how deep that mode does get. You know, the dungeon crawling aspect is a lot of fun, and I enjoy a lot of what this game does to add some flair into the fighting game scene. Not to say that that wasn't happening at the time, but I feel like this is a cool way to present a fighting game, and I think that it does it so very well. Game in the 11th spot of my top 11 games of 2021, of 2021. Ghosts and Goblins Resurrection. Like I said in that video, I think that this is a tough-as-nails platformer that is very hard, but very rewarding when you accomplish a lot of the harder pitfalls that this game throws at you. Sure, some of the level design in this game is kind of trolly, but I feel like when learning the language of the game as it progresses, you sort of kind of learn where to expect some of those pitfalls to crop up, and I feel like that it is a great way to also adapt that hard as hell foundation that the series had with some of the newer twists, like the fuzzy ball wisps that give you upgrades to make the game not necessarily easier, but give you more tools to approach the hard level design in ways that I feel like are a good twist. And I feel like the injections of stuff like different difficulties also sort of make this one of the better jumping on points to this incredibly difficult, relatively obscure franchise that Capcom just decided to bring back into the fray last year in glorious splendor. One of the first games I beat on stream last year, Captain Toad Treasure Tracker. I adore this game. I never played the bonus Switch stuff, but I love the bonus Switch stuff. I think that as a huge fan of Toad, this is a great adventure for him. I love that it is a puzzle platformer with this diorama-style level design. I think that a lot of the quirks seen within that level design shine brightly. I love how cute and simple the game is from a story mode perspective. I like a lot of the secrets you can find within levels. I like that as the game goes on, the puzzles do get more challenging, but it creates this sort of great, I don't know, dynamic evolution the more that you play. I think the utilization of set pieces is really good. I think that it's a quirky Mario-style game, but with Toad as a protagonist. It's fun. It's a fun, charming, little cute puzzle game. Another game from my Game of the Year list, New Pokemon Snap. I did a review of this game. I've kind of talked this game up to death. I think that it's a great expansion on the foundations of a 20-plus-year-old game. Another game that I did a review of and was on my Game of the Year list, Resident Evil Village. To just kind of surmise my thoughts on Village for the last time, unless somebody asks me elsewhere. It was a great way of bringing the intimacy seen in Resident Evil 7 into the batshit world that is Resident Evil as a franchise. Also played Limbo with Rachel. This is a game that I'd always wanted to play in full back in the Xbox 360 days, but I never did. And I had a lot of fun experiencing that firsthand with Rachel. It led us to playing Little Nightmares, and I had a lot of fun with it. I think that it's a very artfully done platformer that utilizes shadows incredibly well. It's got great lighting. It looks gorgeous. And I had a lot of fun playing it with her because it was nice to break down some of the more obtuse puzzles that the game throws at you with somebody else. It was a charming game that similarly to Little Nightmares uses this sort of spooky adjacent aesthetic, lays hard into that aesthetic, and succeeds in execution. Also played another Pokemon-style Nuzlocke, but in Pokemon Stadium, where I added a randomizer element to the gym leader tower. I didn't win, but I figured I'd use this as a point to talk about this game. I love Pokemon Stadium. I played my childhood copy on the channel. It's the one that I've always played anytime I play it on the channel. I like this game as a whole. It's a great battle simulator. I love Gen 1 Pokemon. I like that it acts as a sort of Game Boy emulator for the N64. It presents Gen 1 Pokemon in such a different way than the RPGs, but still feels like a great use of its region and its roster. And the last of the line of solid shooters, even if I liked it more than Call of Juarez and Peter Jackson's King Kong, the official movie of the game, Doom 64. I played the Fight Stick run on the channel last year, and I did beat it, just kind of across both games, both copies of the game that I have. I played 99% of the game on the PS4, and then I beat the final boss on the Switch port. Doom 64 is a fantastic version of Doom. It's a great, reinterpretation of Doom. Whereas Doom is about fast, visceral combat, it's still here in Doom 64, but the focusing on more puzzles and more of an obtuse level design built around puzzles, I feel like showcases the potential again of Doom as a series to be more than just boomer shooter central. I also think Aubrey Hodge's soundtrack helps bring the atmosphere to a completely different realm. And I feel like those ports are well worthwhile if you've never given Doom 64 a shot. I would pick them up. If you like Doom, you want something a little different, get Doom 64. I played Dishonored on the channel in a playthrough where I got the Mostly Flesh and Steel trophy, another bucket list achievement that I've been wanting to get for years. And I love this game. Shake edited it. That was a fun sort of collaborative experience between he and I. And even if he doesn't like the game as much as I do like that they do give you these differences in these big maps. There is variety there. It may not be quite to the caliber that Arcane was sort of pitching it as, but I feel like the game still has enough variety to give you a different type of playthrough if you're wanting to do that. And I think that as far as a stealth game is considered, this is pretty well put together. May not be the best game ever, but it's still really, really good in my opinion. I am running out of room, so we've got to shrink this the fuck down. Now, unlike Metroid Fusion ending up in the A tier in the context of Metroid games, I would probably put the first Zelda in the A tier when measuring it up to the rest of the Zelda series, because it is a really good game, even if it does at some points feel like a relic of its time. For it being a product of the 80s, it's easily one of the best games of the original Nintendo. I feel like the map size alone is pretty huge for an NES game. I feel like the combat, for as primitive as it is still robust as hell. I played it in the basic boy run, for those that didn't know, where I only played with the wooden sword, the basic tunic, and no hard upgrades. And it's difficult. It's a hard way to play the game. But it was fun. And the fact that you can even do something like that embodies a lot of the customization that can happen with a game like this. It's a very open-ended adventure, but I feel like it executes that adventure so very well. The dungeons are fun. Some of the gimmicks throughout the dungeons are also really fun. While the game could have used with maybe some more different bosses thrown in there, the bosses that they have all have their own very difficult to learn attack patterns. It's a game of learning, but I feel like once you do learn it, it is a very fun game to comb through. Another game from my Game of the Year list that I liked, Guardians of the Galaxy for the PS4. Buggy as hell mess. This game is so very buggy. I had some real problems, as you guys saw with my shitpost video that I dropped, but the story here, so very compelling. The combat, a lot of fun. The visual spectacle of it all is very well pulled together. A lot of the sequences in this game are trippy in the right ways. I thought the soundtrack was great. I liked a lot of what this game had, and it felt like a game that I needed at the time and appreciate for what it kind of brought to me as a whole when I was as far as the themes of grief and stuff like that. But if there's one modern game that I played last year that I feel like is a hidden gem that people shouldn't sleep on, it's Guardians of the Galaxy. I also played a DLC that I never got to play when the game originally came out, but I played Resident Evil 4 Separate Ways, the Ada DLC or the Ada unlockable campaign from the PS2 version that carried over into the Switch port. And I like this far more than Operation Ada, where Operation Ada feels kind of like a lazy side piece. This does a good job at fleshing out more corners of the story, something that they would do with Ada in games like Resident Evil 6, but I like separate ways because it does do it very, very well. You know, the fact that it shows her perspective in the cutscenes versus what you would normally see in the game, the pacing of it all, the fight with Sadler in the lab room is tense as hell. There's a lot of tense moments that mirror the tension scene in the game proper, but I like a lot of the pockets of the story that it fleshes out while it's here. One game that I did during the 24-hour marathon and beat was Dicey Dungeons. I beat my run of Dicey Dungeons, and I got to the end. I've actually been playing this a lot more this year. It's kind of become like Slay the Spire, sort of a comfort game for me, and I'll talk about that maybe more in the 2022 game log. But I like Dicey Dungeons a lot. I think that Terry Cavanaugh, a game designer that I already liked some of his work of, did a good job with interpolating sort of tabletop-style RPGs in a roguelike fashion. I've been playing the episodes that I've unlocked throughout this year, and I've been having fun with those. But the game itself, at its core, is just a charming little roguelike with a good soundtrack, a great uniqueness across each character. And then the last game I'm going to be putting in the A tier is Shovel Knight Spectre of Torment. I played a checkpoint in this run of it on the channel. I've played it in the past, but I did a checkpoint in this run on the channel last year, and I love this game. I don't know if it's my favorite side game in the Shovel Knight quadrology, but I really like Spectre of Torment. You know, the macabre twists on the soundtrack are great. I think that the different color palette to accentuate that is also great. Similarly to games like Limbo and Little Nightmares and Monster Prom, it's taking something spooky/spooky adjacent and adding its own charm to it while also doubling down deeply into that spooky adjacent atmosphere, but it does so to service the dramatic story at its core. I like the story of this game. I do like that it is a little bit different in pacing as well. You know, while Plague of Shadows was basically just Shovel of Hope with Plague Knight, I like the Spectre of Torment actually cuts a lot of the overworld aspect, but it kind of makes sense given who the protagonist of the game is. Everything feels like it's done to service the world and the world building, and that's one of the things I like about Yacht Club and what I've loved about all of the side Shovel Knight games. This is the cream of the crop. I wanna express having a drink or a snack handy. If you're already out, go ahead and top yourself off a little bit more. Give yourself a little more goodies. Give yourself some more goodies. Hopefully you're still enjoying this video. If you are, sound off in the comments. Are you shocked at some of my takes so far? Do you wish I put some games lower or higher? Let me know. But with that said, let's get into the S tier. Let's get into the cream of the crop, starting with Resident Evil 4. I've already talked about it a lot in this list so far. I got some stuff here. I got some stuff here. This is one of my favorite games of all time. In fact, I'm going to get all my GOATs out of the way. Like, top 20 material out of the way. Resident Evil 4. Incredible classic. I played it on the channel. I technically finished it this year. That's why I put it on this list. Even if I played most of the game back in 2020, I beat it in 2021. But I love this game. I feel like it is a landmark in gaming. It is a game that sort of set a precedent for a lot of games of its style, and I feel like it's a game that still holds up incredibly well. Something else that I've talked about ad nauseum. I don't feel like I've got much else I can say that I haven't already said about Resi 4, so I'm just going to leave it at that, put it in the S tier. Smash Melee, another game that's sort of adored in its scene. It's one of the tightest fighting games ever made. It is hands down one of the best GameCube games ever made. Either, again, another piece of fighting game ephemera in Smash Bros. Melee, and I love it. It's a game that's broken in a beautiful way. Similarly so, Marvel vs. Capcom 2, a game that's so beautifully broken. Its sheer roster size and diversity within fighting styles in this game is incredible. Another one of my favorite games of all time, one of my favorite fighting games. I played it when I did the Dreamcast test stream because I bought a new Dreamcast last year because my childhood Dreamcast shit the bed. So to sort of christen it, I busted out Marvel 2. I played a tower climb, and I had a blast doing it. I love this game. It's a game that I wish I were better at, similarly to Melee. I wish I were better at these games, but I love them both because they're both well-executed classics in the fighting game genre. Super Metroid, Another game, kind of needs little to no introduction. You know, I've talked about Metroid here, talking about it there. I'm going to talk about it here. I did a Sloshroid playthrough. I got drunk and beat this game and had a blast doing it. It's one of the fundamental rubrics for a great Metroidvania. It took what Metroid 1 and 2 were doing and just made a perfect experience out of it. I love the level design. I love the boss choice. I love the boss design. I love the progression of the game. It is another staple. Similarly to these two, it's another benchmark title that, again, I feel like needs little to no introduction. I feel like if you haven't played Super Metroid, and I have friends that haven't played it yet, you're sleeping on it. You're sleeping on one of the GOATs, like Star Fox 64. Again, I played this game 3 times at this point on the channel. I talked about it on my N64 games list. You guys kind of already know why I love this game. I think that it is one of the most replayable games of all time. I think it's got some of the most iconic dialogue in video gaming. Nintendo invented, you know, rumble controls with the advent of this game. I adore Star Fox 64. And I think as far as remakes go, it reinterprets the sort of fixed course style of Star Fox, the original, into a little more of a looser presentation that overall makes it a much more gratifying experience with Star Fox 64. It is a, again, benchmark game that Nintendo's made. This is kind of a personal pick for a GOAT, but Kirby Star Stacker. It's a falling block puzzle game. It's cute as fuck. I played it during the 24-hour marathon. That's where I played both of these. 24-hour marathon. I had a fun tower climb marathon. I played it for like 30 minutes straight, and it was like such a fun romp. And it's a game that I don't play as often as much as I used to, but when I was a kid, this was like one of the first games I ever fell in love with. It's so simple. It's got the same simplicity that makes a lot of Kirby games really fun and constantly revisitable, but in a falling block format. And I think it does it perfectly. But that's kind of the GOAT section out of the way. Now let's actually talk about some games in a little more of a refined fashion. Starting with Metroid Dread, my game of the year for last year. Incredible experience, showed that, you know, Metroid could still be a series of viable entries in a franchise that it helped sort of lay the foundation for. Mercury Stream expanded Samus's combat in very gratifying ways. She's never controlled so well. A lot of the twists they threw in there in the form of the Emmy rooms and the story twists as a whole were very satisfying to watch unfold as a longtime fan of this series. I adored this game. I had such fun playing this game. I think the soundtrack is alright. I don't think the soundtrack is as good as it is in these games, but I think it's still solid. You know, it lends more to the horror aspect and the sort of cold isolation seen in this mechanically filled world. There's a mystery at its core that I think is executed really well, and I like it. I also finally finished Paper Mario The Thousand Year Door on stream at Evan's request all those years ago, and I had a lot of fun with it. I'm still working on an expectations reality on it, but I think that it is a fantastic RPG that is very charming, equal parts charming, well designed from a control aspect, and endearing. A lot of the stories in this game, a lot of the side stories, along with the main story, are entertaining as hell. You know, I enjoy that every chapter in this game has its own identity. While I don't think all of them are 10 out of 10 experiences, I feel like it is still a fantastic package, and I was glad to finally beat it. I was finally glad to check this game off my proverbial bucket list, and I do think it's definitely one of the best Mario RPGs and definitely deserving of being in the S tier. I also played Shadow of the Colossus for the first time on stream. I did play the Blue Point remake, but I played it with the classic controls, and I will say that this game is gorgeous. Both the original and the remake. I like the art style of the original. You know, I think that it utilizes the PlayStation 2 hardware incredibly well, and I feel like the remake enhances those visuals tenfold. If you notice, I kind of have rearranged the entire window a little bit. It's because I had recorded finishing the games that I beat and was adding this stuff to the side when I lost the footage that I made of me finishing this out. So we're going to do that real quick. I played Donkey Kong Country with Shake. We did a race of it on the channel over the summer last year. It was a lot of fun. I love Donkey Kong Country. It's the only game in the Country series that I've actually beaten. I've played 2, I've played Returns, I've played Tropical Freeze, but I've never beaten them. I think they're all great games. I think they're all fantastic platformers. But if I'm speaking for Donkey Kong Country, it's one of my favorite platformers of the Super Nintendo era. I think the music's great. I think there's a lot of memorable levels. I think that the visuals still hold up to this day. I think it's a testament to Rare in their prime at making incredible platformers by the by. And I would like to play the other games to completion in the series, but this is the only one I have. Speaking of games with Shake for the Super Nintendo, I also played Kirby's Dream Course, which is also going in the S tier. It's another side Kirby game a la Star Stacker that I think is just impeccably designed. It's a golf style game that also integrates Kirby's copy ability gimmick incredibly well. I think that it has such depth for design. You can do some batshit stuff as far as making some cool trick shots happen. And in the Cazsh boys that we did of playing Kirby's Dream Course, I would say I pull off some of the most insane tricks I ever have to this day. I highly recommend watching the Cazsh boys we did on it. I had a lot of fun. Kirby's Dream Course, I just wish there were more. It's such a small game that has mad potential to have far more going on in it than what it does. I also played Street Fighter 3 Third Strike on the Fighting Game Marathon. It's another great fighting game, another top tier. One of my favorites, not quite to the caliber of these two, but I do still like Third Strike. I think that they recovered from what was a spotty beginning with Street Fighter 3 impeccably well with Third Strike. I think it has an interesting roster. I think the animation is gorgeous. I think the soundtrack is really tight, and I think the combo potential is incredible in Third Strike. It is a classic that a lot of people view as that. I don't really have much of a crazy opinion on it in that regard. I think it's just a well-constructed fighting game that is one of the best in the Street Fighter series. And then the last game that I beat, because I'll talk about Monster Hunter Rise, but the last game that I got to the end of the game with was Cyber Shadow. It was all on my Games of the Year list. It was my number 3 game. It's a great game. It was my indie game of the year. It's a great platformer. It showed that Shovel Knight has taste more so than just what they showcased with Shovel Knight, because this was a published game from Yacht Club with development done by Mechanical Head, another small team. But they pulled together this incredible game that has a well-told story, tight level design, and very memorable boss fights. Similarly to a game like Metroid Dread, I think the boss fights in Cyber Shadow are so good. A lot of great sequences in the game by and large. On top of that, the soundtrack by Pentadrange, also incredible. Lots of bops, lots of great utilization of chiptune styles, and I loved Cyber Shadow. Don't sleep on it. I'm kind of giving it high praise by and large. I streamed it in full on the channel, and I think that it's very much worth your time. And that's kind of all the games that I beat last year. This whole pantheon of games right here, these are all the games that I either beat or, showed off everything the game had to offer. I got to credits. That was my sort of criteria for this list, for this portion of the list, was to get to credits. To get to the credits, and I would consider that beating the game. Now, these games over here are all games that I either couldn't necessarily beat because they're multiplayer games, or are games that I played enough of, whether in my free time or on streams, that I felt comfortable enough talking about them in a list like this. Not that I don't intend to beat them, because they are all games that I do intend to beat eventually, and if I do end up beating them, I'll sort of replace them on the list for 2022, and I'll already be doing that with Shovel Knight Pocket Dungeon. I decided in between cuts to just throw it on here because I have it broken up into 4 sections: free time oddities, roguelikes, stream oddities, and multiplayer games. And to get the free time oddities out of the way, because there's only 2 of them here, I've got Super Mario Maker 2. Now, I beat Super Mario Maker 2 Story Mode the year that I got it, but I've been designing a lot of levels. I've been making a game, essentially, out of Super Mario Maker 2. When I started doing that, I made about half a game, almost, last year. I made about 4 worlds in my free time, and I love this game. I think that it's easily an improvement in some regards to Super Mario Maker 1. I like the engines that they did add into the game, and I feel like it's
it's really fun. I feel like it's got a great community around it. I've loved building the world that I have been building, or the worlds that I have been building. Shake was playing them in his free time. If you want to check out Shake playing my levels, go to Shakepool's channel. But yeah, I love Super Mario Maker. I love it so much. I'm gonna put it in the A tier as well. A tier's getting a little crowded here, but I play a lot of games that I like, as you can see. There's a lot of games that I like that I play in my free. I try not to play that many shitty games, if that weren't obvious by just how many games I have from the B tier up. You know, I wanna enjoy the time that I spend with games, so I try not to play that many games that are honestly that shitty, unless it's like a morbid curiosity. And then Monster Hunter Rise, I'm gonna put it in the S tier. It was my number 2 game of the year, but while I didn't beat it, I played what I think is like 70 to 80% of what the game had to offer. I'm still playing it in my free time. Like, I think that it's easily one of my favorite experiences I've had with this series. I think that the multiplayer is much better integrated into it than it was in World. I've loved experimenting more in this game than I have in games of the series past. I think it's a great game. I love Monster Hunter Rise. I've sank like 30 plus hours into it. I think that it's a really fun time, you know, and it definitely brought me some of my favorite co-op memories from last year, and I think that it's a great gateway into the series. If you haven't played Monster Hunter, play Monster Hunter Rise. The movement's incredible. It may spoil you for other games in the series because the movement isn't quite as visceral, but like, I love this game. I think that it's so much fun, and it was one of my favorite purchases I made in all of last year. As for the roguelikes that I played, while I did beat Dicey Dungeons, or I finished a run of Dicey Dungeons, and I finally have done that in Shovel Knight Pocket Dungeon, all of these are roguelikes that I've played, some of which in huge quantities, but at some pockets of the internet, and I'll talk about them as they crop up. I played Shovel Knight Pocket Dungeon. I'm just going to go ahead and put it in the A tier. I played it in my free time. I bought it when it came out. I played the hell out of it so much that I put it on my Games of the Year list because I think it's worth it. I think that, again, similarly to Cyber Shadow, it's a game that you shouldn't sleep on because it's a great falling block puzzle dungeon crawling hybrid. Yacht Club and Vine, because this is the first Shovel Knight game not developed by Yacht Club, and it's incredible. I love this game. I think that it's very addictive in the same way that games like Spelunky are. I think that with the quick turnaround on runs, it just makes you want to funnel yourself back into the fray. I adore this game. I love the remixes on the soundtrack. I like how they translated the other Shovel Knight characters into the game, and I think that it's similarly to all the other Shovel Knight ephemera, it's just another gem. I also play Curse of the Dead Gods, which is an isometric hack and slash roguelike a la games like Hades, but with a different type of tower climbing section, similarly more to like Slay the Spire. It's a fun game. I think that it's not quite as tight as a game like Hades, or as tight in combat as games like Enter the Gungeon or Wizard of Legend, but I do like the wrenches that they throw at you. I think that there's a lot of good give and take. It almost ended up on my Game of the Year list. In any other year where there wasn't as many quality titles, it probably could have ended up on the lower end of my list, but I had a lot of fun with Curse of the Dead Gods. I played it at the request of my buddy Tyler, and I like how there's even more of a hindrance thrown at you the more that you climb this proverbial tower. It sort of lays into the sort of give and take nature of games like this a little more heavily, and I'm putting it in the B tier. It can be a little too frustrating at times for me personally, but I think that it was a really fun game that I think was pretty competently pulled together. I also played Enter the Gungeon with Shake on Shake's channel for Cazsh Boys, and I played Enter the Gungeon a hell of a lot in my free time. I like Enter the Gungeon. I think it's another one of my favorite roguelikes that I've played. I think that similarly to games like Wizard of Legend and Slay the Spire, or similar to the games like Wizard of Legend and Hades, it's got very tight combat. The dodge roll mechanic is just so well utilized. I love how chaotic it looks, but how easily you can rein it in and gain control of a hectic situation. I think that it's a quirky game. It's got a lot of fun charm, and I feel like it's easily one of the better roguelikes that I've ever showed off on the channel in my own time, and I've played on the internet and played on my free time. I'm also going to put it in the A tier. The A tier is getting so crowded. There's so many games in the A tier that I've ran out of room. Death Road to Canada, I also played with Shake on his channel, and this game is funny as hell. It's like a spin on the Oregon Trail while also adding this like dungeon crawling mechanic a la a game like Enter the Gungeon or Wizard of Legend. I think that it's got potential for like some of my favorite moments that I've had in roguelikes. Like during the playthrough with Shake that we did, we had some bonkers shit happen that was hilarious, that I would highly recommend watching the Cazsh boys we did on Death Road to Canada. It's a funny video, and it showcases the potential the game has at being just fucking hysterical. I think while it's got a lot of charm, there are some moments that are genuinely very tense and insane, and I think that it's a solid ass roguelike. It's not my favorite. It's not like it's not like Shovel Knight Pocket Dungeon or End of the Gungeon, a game that I can play quite as repetitively. I can get some time out of this and then be satisfied with it before wanting to play something else. I'm gonna put it in the B tier. You know, I feel like it's a very solid game. It's got a lot of good things to it, but it doesn't quite have the same addictive nature that other roguelikes that I appreciate, like Shovel Knight Pocket Dungeon and End of the Gungeon, do. Now, these two games are two of my favorite games in the roguelike genre that I've played so far. I've sank so much time into both of them, and I think that they're both great for their own very different reasons. I like Wizard of Legend for the same reason I like games like Enter the Gungeon and Death Road to Canada to some degree. It's a great couch co-op experience. The potential in builds that you can have is insane, and it's just a challenging, fun as hell experience. I played it on Cazsh Boys this past year, but I also played it a lot in my free time. It's going to the S tier. It's easily, like, it was one of the first roguelikes that I got insanely addicted to. Like, I'd played other roguelikes in the past, like Rogue Legacy and stuff, and I love those games. I adore those games in their own regard. But I think Wizard of Legend is easily one of the best that the genre has seen. I've loved the updates that they've keep rolling out for it, and I think that it's certainly growing to become one of my favorite games I've ever played. Similarly so, Slay the Spire is in the same regard. That's also going in the S tier. Slay the Spire still holds the record for my most played game on my Switch. I've sank like 200 plus hours into Slay the Spire. I streamed it a handful of times. I played it twice during the 24-hour marathon. I just love Slay the Spire. It's still a game I play at least once a day. Like, I cherish the fuck out of this game. I've definitely seen everything the game has to offer at this point, and I feel like while there certainly could be so much more that they could add, I feel like there's already so much here. There's even stuff I still haven't technically seen. I've still never technically beaten this game, but I've gotten to the heart a handful of times, and I've almost won at least once. But yeah, Slay the Spire, one of my favorite roguelikes. Again, another one of my favorite games of all time at this point. As far as games that I've sank the most time into, Slay the Spire is like top 5. I've sank so much time into this game in 2 years. It's insane. And then the last roguelike that I forgot to put on here, but was the last game on my Game of the Year list that I didn't talk about, was Griftlands. It's also going to go in the A tier. I like this game. I think this game is really, really good. I think that it's a well-animated adventure, roguelike, almost pseudo-RPG hybrid. There's like a relationship building in the dialogue trees on here that I think is really dense. I like both deck building aspects that are in this game. Similarly to Slay the Spire, you've got to build decks, but it's a different type of vibe. I'm actually going to be doing a roguelite run on Griftlands very, very soon. But I love this game. I think that it's really charming. I think that it's got cool character design. It's got cool enemy design. It's got, a great understanding of what makes roguelikes fun in general. Yeah, I love Griftlands. I think it's a great experience. Now, as far as stream oddities, there's a handful of games that I didn't beat on stream, but I played a hell of a lot of, enough that I really want to talk about them here. SpongeBob SquarePants, the movie, the game. Played it on the first marathon, played it for a couple streams after that, got to the near end game and stopped because it's so grindy, it's stupid. This is a solid game. It's a decent game, but damn if it's not arduous as hell to finish. The grinding for the Goofy Goober coins is ridiculous. The amount that they actually expect you to do to beat this game is dumb as hell. And for that reason, it's going to the C tier. Like, I think that this game is fun. I did have fun playing it on stream. But man, as far as games that I don't remember being this much of a slog, this is certainly one of them. I don't remember this game being like this, but like to experience it and fall into those pitfalls was easily one of the most frustrating experiences I had in the last year. I played Crazy Taxi on the I'm just gonna go ahead and put it in the A tier. The A tier is clogged the hell up. I played Crazy Taxi on the Dreamcast test stream because again, it's another sort of classic game in the Dreamcast library. It's a very addictive arcade experience. One of my favorite arcade games, if you remember that video that I made back in the day. I think that it's a fun experience. It has, again, a quick turnaround in its gameplay loop, but it's a game designed well for the arcade. And the home port is just as good. In the portable ports of console games marathon, I played a couple of games. I played Mario Tennis for the Game Boy Color, a game that is actually an RPG. It is an RPG experience for the Game Boy Color that is a tennis RPG, and it is a fantastic game. I love Mario Tennis for the Game Boy Color. I think that it's a tough game. It's a lot harder than I remember it being as a kid, because I played this game as a kid, and I liked this game a lot as a kid, and playing it as an adult, to see how difficult it actually was, I don't know how I beat it as a kid. I didn't end up beating it on stream. I got to the end game, and then I got stuck because my build for my characters was dog shit. I played doubles because I couldn't even play singles. It is a very tough game, but it is a lot of fun, and I like the sort of integration you can have with the N64 copy, which we did do on Cazsh Boys. So yeah, Mario Tennis is great. It's not my favorite game on the Game Boy, but I think that it's very, very solid, and I'm going to put it in the B tier. I think that it's got a lot of charm. It's a lot of fun. It makes me want to play the Golf RPG, because that's Camelot also made the Mario Golf game for the Game Boy Color, an RPG, and I really want to experience that, because I think I would actually get to appreciate that in full, unlike Mario Tennis, where the difficulty curve just continues to ramp up. In an apt sort of way, I'm just not good at tennis, I've realized. Another game I played during the marathon, the Portable Ports of Console Games marathon, that I actually almost beat. I got to near end game for this game, and I just never ended up finishing it because I wanted to play other games in the following day stream. But Stuntman for the Game Boy Advance, really endearing portable port of that game. I think that it was easily the biggest gem I discovered during that marathon, because I liked Mario Tennis already. I knew going into it that it was a really good port of a game. Same with Street Fighter Alpha 3. I think that it's also just a great port of the game. But this, for what they could accomplish on the Game Boy Advance, I had a lot of fun with it. I already like Stuntman on the PS2. I think that it's a great game. I think that it's a unique type of driving game, which is one of the reasons that I like it, and one of the reasons why I wanted to get the Game Boy Advance port, because I wanted to see how they translated that type of game on the Game Boy Advance. But I think it's done admirably well. You know, it's a 3D driving game on the Game Boy Advance that has you doing the specific actions that they want you to do in the game, and I think that it's very forgiving on what it wants you to do. It's not quite as hyper-specific as it may seem, and I feel like it's honestly a gem. I'm going to put it in the B tier. I feel like if you like Stuntman for the PS2, and you want a really interesting version of it, play the Game Boy Advance version. It's honestly pretty good. Like, it's honestly really, really good. Played Tetrasphere on one of my streams. I think it was for my mom's choice stream, because she loves Tetrasphere, and so do I. I'm putting it in the A tier. It's one of my favorite N64 games. As far as a spin on Tetris, it's one of my favorite spins that series has had by and large. That would actually be another really good tier time. Ranking the Tetris games and the ports of Tetris and how well they play on the respective hardware. But Tetrasphere, it's like a 3D sphere type puzzle game where you get to drop the blocks in the places that you want them to on a sphere grid. It translates Tetris in the third dimension a lot better than it may seem, and it's really challenging. It gets to be pretty hard, and playing it in multiplayer is also a pretty hard experience. But I like Tetrasphere. I think that it's a really good game. Its soundtrack is full of, you know, electric music bops, and I like it. I think it's a great game. I think it's another classic. I'm actually going to put it with the other ends. No, I'm not, because it's too far down. But these next two games, the last two stream oddities, were two pinball games that I played that I have on my Switch that I bought, even though they're like shovelware adjacent games, because I like pinball. I like pinball games. My first stream of the year was a pinball stream, and I guess I could put Kirby's Pinball Land in here. But I barely got to play that because that game is broken. But these two games, they're fine. They're not like anything mind-blowing. In fact, they're kind of missing more bells and whistles than I would like for a pinball game. But they're adequate. They're playable. You know, they're pinball games. They're nothing too flashy. They're nothing too extravagant. They're just 3 pinball machines themed around adventure and horror, respectively. I'm gonna put them in the D tier. They're not quite as full of a game experience as anything in the C tier. Like, for as frustrating as SpongeBob was, it still feels like more of an experience than these two games. These feel like flash games that I bought for my Switch. I bought them dirt cheap, but still, they're kind of apps that exist on the internet on game consoles. And as far as the multiplayer games I played last year, most of them, as you can see, are Battle Royale games, because I like Battle Royale games. I think that they're really fun. And I played all of these. I still played some of these this year, but I played all of these last year. I played Knockout City because it was a new game from last year, and it's fine. I wouldn't say it was anything mind-blowing. I certainly didn't get as much time out of it as I thought I would. I even downloaded it both on the Switch and the PlayStation, thinking I might play it more on the PlayStation. I still really haven't, but with that being said, it's a tight game, if not a bit lacking in diversity amongst its player type modes, but like, it's fun. I like its art style. I like its sheen well enough. You know, it wouldn't have ended up anywhere near my games of the year list, but I thought that it was a passable experience. You know, it was fine. It wasn't like incredible, but it wasn't dog shit. You know, it was very average. You know, it was a very normal ass game. Out of all the games I put in the C tier, this is similar to like Crash the Huge Adventure or like Lord of the Rings Return of the King, where they're experiences that I didn't have a bad time with, but I've certainly had better experiences in a multiplayer sense, especially, but across gaming last year for sure. I also streamed Apex on the road to victory. I got my last trophy I needed, and I like Apex Legends. I think it's one of my favorite games in the Battle Royale genre. I think that it's really fun, both by myself and with friends. It's a game that I could definitely see myself playing more in the future. Apex is good. I think the gunplay's tight. I think that it's fun. I like the character roster. I kind of wish there were more maps, but I think the map that's here is really, really fun. I like that the map has changed over the years that it's been out, and I think that it's a good shooter. I think it's a really good shooter. You know, similarly to Doom 64, it's a pretty solid shooter, and I think that it's got room to grow. I think I would give Apex Legends like an 8 out of 10, but there are some other games in here that I also would put as an 8 out of 10. In a similar vein, Spellbreak, it's a solid game. I like it about as much as like Call of Juarez. You know, it's a solid Battle Royale game that sees you, you know, having 2 different types of magic spells, using them together to win, and I got a road to victory on this done. I finally got my first W in Spellbreak, and it was a fun time. You know, I don't hate Spellbreak. I thought it was a decent experience that I definitely am glad that I played and would play more in the future. You know, it's a fun game. I also did a road to victory in Fortnite. I like Fortnite. I actually just recorded a Cazsh Boys in Fortnite last night with Shake, and it's probably the most fun I've had in Fortnite. But like, Fortnite's fine. I don't like the building aspect in Fortnite, and I feel like I could take or leave Fortnite. Like, I don't hate it. I'm not like anti-Fortnite, but similar to Spellbreak, I wouldn't say it's like one of my favorite experiences I've had in a multiplayer game. You know, I've had some great moments in it, but I wouldn't say it's like a top tier game. You know, it's fine. It's very solid. And I think that the more that I come into Fortnite, it's kind of weird, but like, I like the game itself as a whole. I think that it's nothing offensive. It just kind of exists. And then the last game I'm putting on the list, and the last game I'll be talking about for this tier time, this hyper niche tier time on games I played in 2021. Fall Guys. I played Fall Boys with Shake a lot. I put it on my games of the year list in 2020, and I'm still playing it in 2022. I like Fall Guys a lot. I think it's a really fun game. I think it's one of the most unique Battle Royale games out there, and I think that it's been one of my favorite, it's led to some of my favorite stream and recorded moments that I had over the last year. I think it's a fun ass romp that you can go through. I like the updates that they've made to the game. I like all the mini games that they keep adding. I think that the themes that they've had to them are all very different and unique in their own fun ways to give each, multiplayer, to give each mini game its own sort of visual difference from each other from each season. I think Fall Guys is great. I think it's a really great game. I like it a lot more than I may even felt I did when it first came out. But it's a game that continues to grow on me, and is another one of my favorite games I played in the Battle Royale genre, if only for how different it really is. But I like it. I like Fall Guys a lot, so that's that. And those are the games. These are all the games I played or have some important thing I want to talk about that I played in 2021 that I finished or played enough of that I have an opinion on. What do you think of this tier time? Do you think I like too many games? Let me know in the comments down below. What were some of your favorite games that you played last year, whether old or new? Let me know in the comments down below. If you did like this tier time, be sure to give it a like. If you want to see more of my music, gaming, and general notary content, be sure to subscribe. Special thanks to my patrons. If you want to join the ranks to get early access to content, exclusive content, or to help drive the community, it's linked in the description. I'm going to get out of here, though. Thank you again so very much for watching. I've been Warioware. You guys like videos, lives, and situations, and I'll see you another day.
You guys have screwed up. I made this video's done. And it's been done. I was about to upload it when I realized there's one game I forgot that I beat in a sitting, and it was one of the best showings I ever had playing the game. It's one of my favorite games from one of my favorite franchises. You know what we're talking about. Castlevania. Castlevania 1 specifically. The NES Classic. One of my favorite games. It was my number 2 game in the Castlevania games list because I really adore Castlevania 1. It's just a classic, a foundation setter. Again, similarly to a lot of games I already talked about in the GOAT section, one of the best games of its genre, one of the best games of its console. Castlevania 1 is truly a masterpiece. Like, I adore Castlevania 1. I think that it's a simple adventure. You're a vampire hunter fighting the Universal Monsters Rogues Gallery and Dracula at the head of it all, with a fantastic soundtrack, incredible level design, a classic soundtrack, I should say, and laid the groundwork for one of my personal favorite video game franchises. I love Castlevania 1, but you guys already knew that. Now we're really leaving. Goodbye.